One thing I've always been okay with doing and have done is washing someone's feet. Even though I hate touching feet, but it's something about doing this for someone that's very humbling and actually kind of rewarding as well. But recently, Yahuwah has blessed me with the spiritual meaning behind the washing of the feet. And that's what we're going to talk about. All right, let's get into it. Get into the revelation that Ruach HaKodesh gave me about foot washing, I just want to reiterate that there's nothing wrong with pulling out a water basin, putting soap and oils and whatever in there, and washing someone's feet. We hold a lot of stress in our feet and we don't realize it, so it can be very therapeutic for someone if we actually literally wash their feet. However, we worship Yahuwah in Ruach and in truth. And with that being said, it's important that we know the spiritual meaning behind it so that even if we do things in the physical, they are rendered null and void if we're not spiritually doing them. So again, there's nothing wrong with physically doing, washing someone's feet, literally washing someone's feet. But if you don't know the spiritual meaning behind it and you're not doing the spiritual aspect of it, then literally washing someone's feet doesn't really mean anything, because good deeds are not what brings you into the house. You know what I'm saying? You have to enter in through the door, who is Yahusha, and he literally told us that the example he gave by the washing of the feet is what we're supposed to do. So with that being said, again, it's important we understand what he did spiritually, because he even says, and you're going to hear it when I read it, that Peter didn't know what he had did, but he would know eventually what he had did, right? And we know that it has to be more than just literally washing the feet for him to say that, because this was a part of the culture, washing each other's feet. You came to the house, it was hospitable for you to do these things. So again, Yahusha alluded to the fact that it was more to this than just literally washing someone's feet. So let's get into it. This is Yehukanan, John, chapter 13, and I'm going to read from verses 1 to 17. Now before the feast of the Pesach, when Yahusha knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Yehuda Iscariot, Shimon's son, to betray him, Yahusha, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from Yahuwah and went to Yahuwah, he rose from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, the students' feet, the taught ones' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. Then came he to Shimon Kepha, and Kepha said unto him, Master, do you wash my feet? Yahusha answered and said unto him, What I do you know not now, but you shall know hereafter. So that's verse 7. So this is what I meant by Yahusha saying this, is indicating that it's more than just taking oils and waters and whatnot and cleaning someone's actual feet off. It's a spiritual meaning behind it. Because again, we worship Yahuwah in Ruach and in truth, because he is a Ruach. He is spirit, right? He exists in the spirit realm, which is dominant to the physical realm that we are currently existing in. Verse 8, Kepha said unto him, You shall never wash my feet. Yahusha answered him, If I wash you not, you have no part with me. Okay? Again, another key to what he's talking about. Shimon Kepha said unto him, Master, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Yahusha said to him, He that is washed need not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit. And you are clean, but not all. All right? So he's saying that if your body is clean, You only need to wash your feet. Okay? So, verse 11, for he knew who should betray him. Therefore he said, you are not all clean. So after he had washed their feet and had taken his garments and was set down again, he said unto them, know you what I have done unto you? I keep stopping, but it's for a reason. So if they understood that he was just literally washing their feet, and this is a part of their culture, mind you, because these are awakened Israelites. They know that they're Israelites. They know who Yahuwah is. They're not coming up out of a complete darkness like we are. So they would know what the culture is. And because the culture is to wash people's feet, there's more to this conversation, because Yahusha is literally saying, you know what I just did for you? He's teaching them right now. You call me teacher and Yahuwah, and you say, well, for so I am. And teach, remember this, they call him teacher. So that means they're students. If I then, your Yahuwah and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Aman, aman, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his master, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If you know these things, happy are you if you do them. So, the thing I love about Yahuwah's word is there's layers. So you can see the literal washing of the feet. You can also see that he's talking about being a servant leader. You know, he's showing them, you know, I'm serving you even though I'm your leader. So that's an aspect of it. But then this is the part where Yahuwah got, I don't know, he really blessed me with this information. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but in Vayakra or Leviticus chapter 1, I'm going to highlight verses 9 and verses 13, but let me give you a synopsis of what's going on. So this is the chapter that's talking about the ascending smoke offering and how to carry it out. The first portion, verses 1 through 10, or 1 through 9, apologies, talk about the ox or the bullock in some translations being the first sacrifice. Like if your sacrifice is a bullock, you're supposed to sacrifice in this way, you know. And it mentions in verse 9, this is what it says in verse 9, but his inwards and his legs shall he wash in water, and the priest shall burn all on the altar to be an ascending smoke sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Yahuwah. So the washing of the inwards and then of the legs is very key. Hold on to that. So then in verses 10 to 13, it talks about if your offering is sheep or goat, then you're supposed to, you know, prepare the sheep or goat the same way. So verse 13 literally says the same thing as verse 9. But he shall wash the inwards and legs with water, and the priest shall bring it all and burn it upon the altar. It is an ascending smoke sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Yahuwah. So the revelation that Ruach HaKodesh gave me about verses 1 through 9 and then verses 10 to 13 is 1 through 9 is talking about Yahusha, 10 to 13 is talking about Yasharal, the sheep and the goat, the wheat and the tare being grown up together. Because Yasharal, whether they be a sheep or a goat, is still going to be sacrificed. It's just depending on, you know, if you're a sheep or a goat, which place you're going to, Renew Jerusalem or the lake of fire. Then verses 14 to 17 reads, and if the ascending smoke sacrifice for his offering to Yahuwah be of fowls, then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or of young pigeons, and the priest shall bring it unto the altar and wring off his head and burn it on the altar, and the blood thereof shall be wrung out at the side of the altar, and he shall pluck away his crop with his feathers and cast it beside the altar on the east part by the place of the ashes. And he shall cleave it with the wings thereof, but shall not divide it asunder. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar, upon the wood that is upon the fire. It is an ascending smoke sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Yahuwah. So this is the only sacrifice out of the ascending smoke sacrifices that's prepared differently. You don't see the washing of the insides or the legs being done. So what Yahuwah was showing me is this is the stranger that comes in and is grafted into Yasharal among us. And the reason that he said that is I just read to you that one of the ways that this particular sacrifice is prepared is the head is wrung off. So when I asked Yahuwah, what does it mean for them to, why are you wringing the head off? He said, because any deity that someone is worshiping is the head of that person, right? Well, Yahuwah is supposed to be your head now. So it's literally them denouncing the spiritual, it's denouncing the deities that they have been worshiping and their own culture, so that Yahuwah can now come in and be the head of their life via his son Yahusha. Okay? Prayerfully, that makes sense. If not, I always provide my email address at the end of these, so you can always just reach out to me, okay? So with that being said, going back to verses 9 and 13, the washing of the inwards and the washing of the legs. So how this relates to John chapter 13, Yehukanan 13, is, let's go back to verses 6 through 10, and we're going to focus on verse 10 real quick, okay? Then came Yahusha to Simon Peter, and Peter said unto him, Master, do you wash my feet? Yahusha answered and said unto him, What I do you know not now, but you shall know hereafter. And Peter said unto him, You shall never wash my feet. Yahusha answered him, If I wash you not, you shall have no part with me. Shimon Kepha, or Peter, said unto him, Adonai, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. And Yahusha said to him, He that is washed need not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and you are clean, but not all. So Peter's saying, or Kepha saying, you shall never wash my feet, right? So again, this is a cultural thing. So culturally, Peter understood the reason why the feet are washed. He understood that it was his job to do it. I mean, think about it. You're looking at the word of Yahuwah, and the word of Yahuwah is telling you that I'm finna wash your feet. You know what I'm saying? I get where Peter was coming from. But again, what we hear Yahusha say to him indicates that there is a way deeper spiritual meaning to what he is doing that Peter's not understanding. And so he's taking this opportunity to teach him. And again, focusing on verse 10. He that is washed need not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and you are clean, but not all. So I just want to venture over to chapter 15, verses 1 to 3 real quick, okay? This is still in the book of John, Yehukanan. I am the vine of truth, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that bears not fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he purges it, that it may bring forth more fruit. Now you are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. Okay? So that's one witness. That's one witness as to where what Yahusha is talking about them being clean. And now I just want to go to Ephesians chapter 5 real quick, starting in verse 25, because this is another witness. Every time I read from a book in the Bible, the person that wrote it, I consider it to be a witness. And Yahuwah said that by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a thing is established, right? So these people are my witnesses. Well, they're not my witnesses. They're witnesses to the word of Yahuwah. And I'm also a witness in Ruach HaKodesh. So this is more than 2 or 3 witnesses. But I just want you to understand why Yahuwah has me going to all these different places. So Ephesians 5, starting in verse 25. Men, love your women, even as Mashiach also loved the called out assembly and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious called out assembly, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish, right? Or Kadesh, and without blemish. So verse 26, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word. So again, the washing of water by the word. This is the second time that we heard that the word is what is washing them, right? Okay. And before I leave out of Ephesians 5, verses 25 to 27. I just want to say that Yahusha is the bride of Hamashiach. Okay. So the entire time the Talmudim, the taught ones, the disciples spent with Yahusha, he was washing their insides by his teachings. He is the word of Yahuwah. So his teachings are washing their insides if they do what he says, right? So Yehukanan 15, 4 to 17. And I'm just going to read it straight out and then move on because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here. But just another example. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine, no more can you except you abide in me. So when our insides are washed clean, right, then we're able to produce righteous fruit unto Yahuwah. And Yahusha is literally saying, if you don't abide in me, right, you can't produce this fruit. You can only produce it because of me. And to abide in him is to remain in the house, to dwell with him. You know what I'm saying? Fellowship with him, spend time with him. I mean, as you would your spouse. Like I don't see how some people have marriages where they don't see their spouse often. You know what I'm saying? And it happens because you have pilots and truck drivers and stuff. And so they don't see theirs. But even in those situations, if you're constantly on the phone, you're constantly just in conversation somehow, you're constantly communicating somehow with each other, you can still have a very strong marriage. It might just be different from the traditional type of marriage, but you can still have a strong marriage. You cannot have a strong marriage if you're not fellowshipping with your spouse. Because you won't know your spouse. You'll have a spouse that is a stranger to you, you know? And Yahusha already said that there are some people that he's going to be like, I never knew you. You who practice lawlessness. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, he is the law of Yahuwah. If you practice lawlessness, that means you practice disobeying your husband, right? So again, the abiding in him, we have to abide in him because when we fellowship with him, we spend time with him, we get to know him. Then that's how we are washed clean from our insides and we're able to produce the righteous fruit. Yahusha said that it's not what goes into a man that makes him unclean, but that which comes out of a man. And we know that Jeremiah 17:9 tells us that the heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it, right? So what Yahusha was actually teaching with that was that our hearts are wicked. And out of the abundance of the heart, the lips speak, right? So if we have this wickedness in our heart and it's never removed and something else put in its place, i.e. Ruach HaKodesh, the testimony of, actually it's the testimony of Yahusha that's supposed to be in our heart, right? So if the wickedness isn't removed out of our heart and then the testimony that Yahuwah gives to us of Yahusha placed there instead, then we're not clean from the inside out, right? And going back to the sacrifices, remember they were clean. They cleaned the inwards and then the legs. And we're going to get to the legs part later. But right now we're focusing on the cleaning the inwards. Okay? Hallelujah. Where was I? I think I'm verse 5. I am the vine, you are the netzarim. He that abides in me and I in him, the same brings forth much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. If a man abides not in me, he is cast forth as a branch and is withered, and men gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me... Wait, before I go further, I want to go to Leviticus real quick, so give me just a second. Okay, so I just want to read that one more time. If a man abides not in me, he is cast forth as a branch and is withered, and men gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. So that's verse 6 of John 15, right? So hop on over to Leviticus chapter 8 real quick. So a brief synopsis of the last part of this chapter is talking about the consecration of Aaron and his sons. And Moshe is being given instructions on how to, carry this out. And he's now instructing his brother and his nephews on how they are to carry these things out that Yahuwah told him for the high priest and his sons, right? And so part of that is they have to consecrate themselves. The message is always for the messenger first, right? Yahusha talks about, taking the plank out of your eye before you can see fit to take the speck out of your neighbors or out of your brothers, right? This is the same thing. They cannot, the priests are who Yahusha brought the animals to make the sacrifices. If they are not clean, then they cannot sacrifice on behalf of the people, because they need to sacrifice themselves, which they still do. I mean, the high priest, before they go in and make atonement, they have to make atonement for themselves through their own personal sacrifices. Then they have an animal that they sacrifice for the atonement of Yahusha. So again, you got to do it first. So he's talking about this consecration. Now listen to what it says. This is chapter 8 of Leviticus, starting in verse 33. Actually, starting in verse 31. And Moshe said unto Aaron and his sons, boil the flesh at the door of the tabernacle of the assembly, and there eat it with the bread that is in the basket of consecrations, as I commanded, saying, Aaron and his sons shall eat it. And that which remains of the flesh and of the bread shall you burn with fire. And you shall not go out of the door of the tabernacle of the assembly in 7 days, until the days of your consecration be at an end. For 7 days shall he consecrate you, as he has done this day. So Yahuwah has commanded to do. To make an atonement for you. Therefore shall you abide at the door of the tabernacle of the assembly day and night 7 days, and guard the watch of Yahuwah, that you die not, for so I commanded. So Aaron and his sons did all the things which Yahuwah commanded by the hand of Moshe. So that coincides with verse 6 in John 15. So the door of the tabernacle of the assembly is Yahusha. John chapter 10 talks about him being the door to the sheepfold. Anybody that comes in another way and not through the door is a thief and a robber, right? And he literally says that he is a door to the sheepfold. I recommend going and reading John chapter 10, verses 1 to 11, if you want that confirmation. But yeah, he is the door. And going back to verse 35 in Leviticus chapter 8, therefore shall you abide, is that word again, at the door of the tabernacle of the assembly, day and night 7 days, and guard the watch of Yahuwah, that you die not, for so I am commanded. So remember, Yahusha is saying, if you don't abide in him, you'll be cut off, cast into the fire, and burned. It's the same thing that he was talking to Aaron and his sons about. And that abiding 7 days has a deeper spiritual meaning as well, because I believe we're in the 6th day right now. Just going to say that. I'm just going to say that, and I'm going to keep it moving. But anyway, verse 7, John 15. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you shall ask what you will, and it shall be done unto you. Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit. So shall you be my taught ones, or my students. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Continue you in my love. If you guard my commandments, you shall abide in my love, even as I have guarded my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So think about it. When your children do what you ask them to do, it's not that you don't love them when they're disobedient, but just think about how much more you feel love for them when they do what you say. And even, I'm not a man, and I've never been married, so I can't really speak too much on this subject. I don't really know how it feels, but I can imagine a man, especially one of our men, that's used to being out here in the world and getting crapped on left and right at their job, at the grocery store, just for simply existing and being who they are. And then they come home and their wife abides in their love and keeps their commands. And it's just their wife isn't their peace, but their wife brings peace into a chaotic, a chaotic world, a chaotic existence. So I can imagine how much more love that man has for that woman that isn't the cherry on top of the chaos that he experiences all day long, you know? And that's what I hear Yahusha saying in this. Not that, he's experiencing chaos, but don't think you finna come in here and be chaotic and be his bride at the same time, Because chaos is of the world. That's Babylon. That's confusion. And one of the Yakotis in the assembly I'm a part of, she broke down the word repentance or repent in the Paleo, and it literally means to turn away from chaos. So if you're truly repentant, you're not being chaotic. Feel me? So I just want to throw that in there. Verse 8. Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, so that you should be my students. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Continue you in my love. If you guard my commandments, you shall abide in my love, even as I have guarded my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do whatsoever I command you. Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knows not what his master does, but I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known unto you. You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you, that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever you shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it you. These things I command you, that you love one another. So with all that being said and done, Yehuda Iscariot is the only one who wasn't washed clean from the inside out. First and foremost, because he was created as a vessel of dishonor from the beginning. He had to be in place in order for Yahusha to be put on the execution stake. But the way Yahuwah did it was just like what he did with Pharaoh. He hardened his heart. Now, it doesn't necessarily say in the written word that Yehuda Iscariot's heart was hardened, but he walked with Yahusha the same way the other 11 did, but he didn't abide in Yahusha the way the other 11 did, meaning that he really didn't let the word into his heart. You know what I'm saying? And no, I don't mean it in some religious way. Come into my heart. I don't mean that, but yeah, because when you read Deuteronomy 6, the Shama, Yahuwah literally says that let these words that I give unto you be in your heart, that it may be your frontlet between your eyes and a sign upon your hand. So what he's saying is, when I give you the testimony of Yahusha to put into the Ark of the Covenant, which is your heart, you should meditate on my word, who is Yahusha, day and night, right? So that it may be a sign upon your hand. The sign upon your hand is a covenant with Yahuwah because you did what Yahusha said. You see what I'm saying? Hopefully that makes sense, and I'm not babbling, all right? So when you go back to the correlation between John 13 and Leviticus chapter 1, them being the sacrifices, okay? So, again, Yahusha spent time with his Talmudim, his students, for quite some time. I want to say it was a few feast days that passed. I know we've always been taught that it was 3.5 years. I tried to find how it was 3.5 years and I couldn't. So I'm purposely not saying 3.5 years because I don't want to continue to say things that we were taught in Christianity without proof that that is the truth. So I'm not saying it wasn't 3.5 years. I'm just saying I'm purposely not saying it because as of right now, I'm not 100% sure that it was exactly 3.5 years. But the duration that the disciples spent with Yahusha, he was teaching them. He was washing their insides, right? So he was preparing them as a sacrifice. First and foremost, we know that we're supposed to be a sacrifice unto Yahuwah because of what it says in Romans chapter 12. So Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Yahuwah, that you prepare your bodies a living sacrifice, Kadash, acceptable unto Yahuwah, which is your reasonable service. Kadash is set apart. Set apart, acceptable unto Yahuwah, which is your reasonable service. So it's reasonable for us to lay ourselves on across Yahuwah's altar and allow him to take from us everything that doesn't look like him. Right? Cut away the sin. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Yahuwah. So in verse 2, the renewing of the mind happens when one is washed by the water of the word. All right? So going back to the whole sacrifice piece and how we have to be on Yahuwah's altar so that he can sacrifice us, or when I say sacrifice, I mean he can cut the sin away from us, right? So if you go to Acts chapter 1, I'm going to read 1-5, because before we became the temple of Ruach HaKodesh, there was an actual place where Yahuwah had his altar, right? And that was Jerusalem. So Yahusha instructs his taught ones, his disciples, to stay at the altar, right? So verse 1 of Acts chapter 1, and I'm going to go down to verse 5. The former treatise have I made, O Theophilus, of all that Yahusha began both to do and teach, until the day in which he was taken up. After that, he, through the Ruach HaKodesh, had given commandments unto the apostles whom he had chosen, to whom also he showed himself alive after his passion, by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of Yahuwah. And being assembled together with them, commanded them that they should not depart from Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father, which said he, you have heard of me, for Yehukanan truly baptized with water, but you shall be baptized with the Ruach HaKodesh not many days hence. So he told them basically to stay at the altar, because that's where the sacrifice is going to happen. That's where you will receive this promise, but you have to be on the altar to receive the promise, because once Yahuwah cuts the sin away from you, then he gives you his spirit. Remember the parable of the house that was swept clean and the unclean spirit went out and couldn't find no place, to dwell. So it came back to the house, and because it found the house put back together, but it was empty, it went and brought 7 more spirits, even more deadly than itself. So Yahuwah puts his Ruach in you after he cleans you up, after he washes your insides, so that you aren't just a clean vessel for more unclean spirits to come in. Because I'm going to tell you this, there's a lot of people that don't believe this, but if Ruach HaKodesh is dwelling within you, no other spirit can be in you. Ruach HaKodesh is the spirit of Yahuwah. There is no spirit greater than Ruach HaKodesh, right? Which means no unclean spirit can dwell in you if you are filled with Ruach HaKodesh. Point blank period. So the people that are telling you otherwise, that you got spirits in you, you're possessed and all this other stuff, please, by all means, let them know Yahuwah rebuke you. Okay? Because we're not finna play them games. All right? And then we see in, I know I can get off on a tangent. Then we see in chapter 2 of Acts, the actual promise come. So verses 1-4 of Acts chapter 2 says, and when the day of Shavuot was fully come, this is the Feast of Weeks now, they were all with one accord in one place. All right? It wasn't nobody over here arguing about, what they should do, how they should do it, where they should be. Nobody was arguing. They were in one accord in the same place, the altar. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, and began to speak with other tongues as the Ruach gave them utterance. And then we see later on in chapter 2 that they're speaking in other known languages that they just don't know themselves. But the people around them that are witnessing this, that are from many different places and speak different languages, they all hear them in their own language, okay? This is verse 2 of Deuteronomy chapter 26. Okay? Hold on. I thought I was going to be able to turn to it before I got finished. Start at verse 1. And it shall be when you are come into the land which Yahuwah gives you for an inheritance, and possesses it, and dwell therein, that you shall take of the first fruits of all the fruit of the earth, which you shall bring of your land, that Yahuwah gives you, and shall put it in a basket, and shall go into the place which Yahuwah shall choose to place his name there. So the place that Yahuwah chooses to put his name there. And remember, Yahusha said, stay in Jerusalem, don't go nowhere. That's the place that Yahuwah chose to put his name. I just found that amazing how all this is kind of, going together. But anyway, so heading back to the book of John. Chapter 18 shows that Yahusha was sacrificed during the Pesach. He was the lamb, the sacrificial lamb, going back to Leviticus chapter 1. So he's the ox, the bullock. Some translations say bullock, some say ox, some say lamb. It just really depends on which one. But if you look up bullock, you'll see that it's actually another name for ox. And then John chapter 19 verse 31 says that it was the preparation day for this set apart, this high Shabbat, which is Pesach. And in verse 42 it says the same thing. And this is just to give you kind of a time frame, because Yahuwah does everything according to his own word. You feel me? He's not a hypocrite. So just if you want to see how he's kind of set up Yahusha's sacrifice to be lined up with the Pesach, which is also kind of looks like Leviticus chapter 1. So how does this all relate to Yahusha washing their feet? Well, he cleaned them up from the inside by his teachings and by him actually doing what Yahuwah told him to do in front of them. So then when he tells Peter that if you're clean, you only need to wash your feet, what Yahuwah was telling me was that the washing of the feet is what we would call discipleship, right? You're literally teaching others how to walk the righteous path that Yahuwah has placed before them. By one, doing it yourself, and two, teaching them how to do it by not just your actions, but by showing them in the word as well, right? Is this what Yahusha sometimes said, it is written. Where was it written? It's written in the Torah. You know what I'm saying? He was telling them, it is written. He was quoting Isaiah. He was quoting other places. He even quoted Leviticus 18 and 19. 19 and 18. Where he tells you to love your neighbor as you love yourself. He said it is written. And when you go back and you look where it's written, you'll see that he's literally quoting stuff that Yahuwah has already said a long time ago to our ancestors. And so he's teaching us. He taught us how to walk the narrow path, and he washed our feet because the path is holy. It's Kadash. It was set apart, not holy. It's Kadash, right? Set apart. And so in order to walk this righteous path, we have to have clean feet. And then we turn around and we are an example to the younger generation that Yahuwah is waking up. And I don't mean numerical age, I mean spiritual age. So the people that Yahuwah wakes up after us, we are that example to them through our own actions and also through our teachings in Torah about how to abide in Yahusha. So that's washing their feet. So going back to the path being Kadash, I'm going to take you to Exodus chapter 3, 1 through 6 real quick, okay? Now Moshe kept the flock of Yithro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of Yahuwah, even to Horeb. And the angel of Yahuwah appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a thorn bush. And he looked, and behold, the thorn bush burned with fire, and the thorn bush was not consumed. And Moshe said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the thorn bush is not burnt. And when Yahuwah saw that he turned aside to see, Yahuwah called unto him out of the midst of the thorn bush and said, Masha, Masha. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Draw not nigh, or draw not near, hither. Put off your shoes from off your feet, for the place where you stand is set apart ground. Moreover, he said, I am the Eluah of your father, the Eluah of Abraham, the Eluah of Yitzchak, and the Eluah of Jacob. And Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon Yahuwah. Right? So when he washed the disciples' feet, he was preparing them for the Kadash, the narrow, the righteous path that they would have to walk with Yahuwah. And then we have to do the same thing that he did by first being obedient to Yahusha, and then also being able to teach them in his written word, in Yahuwah's written word. That is what washing someone's feet looks like spiritually. You introduce them to Yahusha, who cleans them up from the inside out, and then you be that example for them, and you show them Yahusha's example, so they have the testimony of Yahusha as well. And I know I'm saying it over and over and over again, because sometimes I do feel like when I'm speaking, it makes sense to me, and I'm not really quite sure if it makes sense to whoever's listening. So if you go back to John chapter 13, Yahusha even said that we're supposed to do this. So he said, if I then, your Yahuwah and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. So he's telling us to do the same thing. And thinking about it is, it's also being that iron that sharpens iron too, for the ones that have already, if you guys woke up at the same time, you see your brother or your sister going astray, come on. You got to say something to them so that they can continue to walk the righteous path that's been set before them, right? But then let's look at verse 21 in John chapter 20. Then said Yahusha to them again, Peace be unto you, as my Father has sent me, even so I send you. And before I forget, I just want to show you something. This is Yehukanan, John chapter 12, right? So Yahusha was our example, and then the disciples, they mirrored Yahusha, and then so on and so forth, right? So I want to read this. So this is after chapter 11. In chapter 11, this is where Lazarus was resurrected from the dead by Yahusha. And so now this is 6 days before the Pesach or Pesach. So just listen. Then Yahusha, 6 days before the Pesach, came to Bethany, where Alazar, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Alazar was one of them that sat at the table with him. Then took Maryam a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Yahusha, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. All right. Keep going. Then said one of his students, Yehuda Iscariot, Shimon's son, which should betray him, why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the bag and bore what was put therein. Then said Yahusha, let her alone. Against the day of my burying has she kept this. For the poor always you have with you, but me you have not always. Many people of the Yahudim therefore knew that he was there, and they came not for Yahusha's sake only, but that they might see Alazar also, whom he had raised from the dead. So it's very important what Yahusha said to Yehuda In verse 7, then said Yahusha, let her alone against the day of my burying. Has she kept this? So notice that his is oil and his students was water, because his feet were anointed, theirs were washed. You got to understand who Yahusha is, right? He's the son of Yahuwah, whom no sin is within. So he's just anointed, which realistically, he was already anointed. This is just something being done in the physical to show you that he is anointed. He is the anointed one, right? That's what Messiah is, the anointed one. So he was anointed, but they had to be cleaned up in order to walk the path. I just wanted to put that in there, but he still did what they did. You know what I'm saying? Yahusha has never done or commanded us to do anything that he himself didn't do, and everything he does is what he's seen and heard the Father do and say. So yeah, I praise y'all for these things. And again, I know that it's layers to these things. I'm not saying that if you go back through and you read this, you won't get an even greater revelation than this, but this is the revelation that I was given right now. And I didn't get it before because I have actually literally washed someone's feet before, you know. So I'm okay with doing the physical, but we're supposed to worship in Ruach and in truth. So anytime I see something being done by Yahusha, I always ask Yahuwah, what is the spiritual meaning behind it? Anytime I see Yahuwah giving a commandment, I ask him, what's the spiritual meaning behind it? Like, how do I practically apply this to my life? Because my people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. I don't want to be that person that is telling Yahuwah how amazing he is and thanking him for all the things that he's done in and through me and so on and so forth, but I ain't doing none of what he said. I don't want to be that person. And I don't want any of y'all to be that person either. So practically, we have to know how these things look spiritually, because that is the spiritual works that Yahusha said that he would reward each man according to his works, right? Because, we were taught, so those of us that came out of Christianity, we were taught through Christianity that this is not a works-based doctrine, right? Because they don't understand that spiritually it is a works-based doctrine. Yes, Yahusha makes you free, but in order for you to abide in him, you have to do some spiritual work. We're going to go to Revelation chapter 22, verse 12. And behold, I come quickly. This is Yahusha speaking. And my reward is with me to give to every man according to all his work shall be. Well, to give every man according as his work shall be. So if he's rewarding according to your work, what's the work you're supposed to be doing? Clearly, you're supposed to be doing some type of work. But they'll tell you it's not work-based doctrine. No, you're right. Because you guys are not worshiping Yahusha. Yahuwah. You're worshiping a deity that is pretending to be Yahuwah and leading you away from Yahuwah by telling you to do the exact opposite of what Yahuwah has told you to do. And I'm not talking to anybody that's on here, because 9 times out of 10, if you're listening to this podcast, you're an Israelite that has been awakened by Yahuwah. And if not, then surprise, stop worshiping God. It's a Babylonian deity of fortune, according to Isaiah 65 and 11. All right, so here's the email. If you guys want to get in contact with me, you can contact me via email at replenishme@gmail.com, RIPLENISH me@gmail.com. I love you all. Much ahaba and shalom.